Good day, this is Ray Roberts. I just want to take a couple seconds here to create a video in response to some of the posts, or some of the responses rather, that was submitted to the post I made on Facebook yesterday. I think I actually really appreciate the responses. I understand. Let me say this. I very much understand the many reasons why people get into teaching, and I understand that society, in many ways, society has convinced people that teaching is a good fallback, and we have to understand the reason why that concept of teaching is a good fallback exists. The reason why it exists is because in many cases we're always looking for outstanding teachers. Teaching is one of those professions where you always have to feed the monster. Um, there's never a shortage of good teachers. Teaching is a profession, like many professions, that people can get burnt out at various stages in their career. So we always need to feed the monster. Teacher retention, teacher certification qualifications, teacher ability is always something that's in question all throughout the world, based on my experience. So, so the notion of, you hear these notions, those who cannot do teach, which is, it's come from a position of arrogance from other professions, and it also comes from this idea of it's teaching is a profession that you can fall back on. And my position is that I understand that idea, that concept, that notion is out there, but it's incorrect, improper, and it is the reason why schools fail. And as an African American man, it's the reason why, primary reason why, not the only, but it's a big reason why the African American community is not successful. Huge. And the reality is, some people may say, don't make it a race issue. The reality is, as African Americans, and I'm really making this video because I posted my posting to the African American teaching group. So as African Americans, although we're abroad, we cannot abdicate ourselves of the responsibility that we have as African Americans, because we're in a very precarious situation worldwide. We're in a precarious situation in America. We're in a precarious situation when we travel throughout the world. And those who don't see that or recognize that, I think there's some other things going on, and it also points to why we have a problem in the African American community. So the reason why the post was made is based on my experience. Okay? And again, who am I? My name is Ray Roberts. I've been teaching for 18 years. I'm working on my doctorate degree in education. Education is my passion. Again, I kind of gave you, an informal resume, but I've served in many, many positions in education. I live, breathe, and eat this stuff. I run a TESOL course. I have projects in Africa where we try to educate teachers, and we try to put up schools for villages who don't have schools. Education is my life. So let me say this: I really take it personal. I take it personal. Yes, I take it personal when people get into the profession of education and don't take it seriously. Why? Because education is the great equalizer. Education is the reason why people will succeed. Nothing more, nothing less. And when I speak of education, I'm talking about, as Albert Einstein has said, not the education from books and textbooks. It's the residue of when you forget what the textbook says. Education is that dynamic teacher who taught beyond the textbook. Education is that teacher who is so compassionate. Those parents who are so compassionate, the community members and leaders who are so compassionate about making sure the future young people have an understanding, a proper understanding of how to thrive in the world, how to synthesize, how to apply, how to evaluate. That's why I'm passionate about education. And as an African American man, this is what we lack in the African American community. We look at education in a very low level application. We look at education from a knowledge point of view. And there are a lot of higher thinking skills above knowledge. So for me, teaching is not just a issue of profession and career. It's the issue of righting the ship. It's the issue of saving minorities of the world. It's the issue of saving the African American community. And anyone who's interested in saving their community will quickly know and understand that ignorance and being properly trained is the key to success. If you are ignorant, you will not be successful. If you are properly trained, if you have a proper understanding, then you will be successful. And the ground zero in this are teachers. And this means that teachers have to be above it all. As the Quran says, God is above the universe. And teachers have to have, I'm not suggesting that teachers need to be God. However, what I'm saying is teachers need to go into the classroom with the sense of purpose. Teachers need to go in the classroom loving the art form and the craft of teaching. Because it is that serious. A great teacher is reflective. In fact, reflection, the ability to reflect, is probably the most powerful tool a teacher could have. Reflection. Those teachers who are not properly motivated and consider teaching a job, they won't properly reflect. They will always rely and be dependent on other people, their administrators, team members, parents, the community, the student, to do their work. So when we're talking about teaching is not an A-B type of situation. Teaching is an A-B-C 1, 2, 3 type of situation. It is a subjective and objective art form. It is a craft. And I just want to share something. Some of you may have heard of John Hattie. I hope many of you have heard of John Hattie as teachers. And for those who are not familiar with John Hattie has research that he's been doing for the last several decades in relation to visible learning. And basically with visible learning, it's the acts that we do in the school, outside the school, that affect learning. That either has a positive effect on learning or a negative effect on learning. And what John Hattie would tell you is that most of everything that we do has in the classroom, or the students do, have a positive effect, or has a positive effect. There are very few things that have negative effect. And if you look at this abbreviated chart on visible learning, because there are a lot more variables to this, you will see that only summer vacation television and cell phones, mobile internet services, devices have a negative effect. Okay, but anything that we do has a positive effect, and this is the problem with teaching, and this is why everyone thinks they can teach, because anyone can go in a classroom and do something that has a positive effect on learning. However, just because something has doesn't have a negative, just because something has a positive effect from a numerical point of view, that doesn't mean that it's effective. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Just because something has a plus or a positive and it's not a negative, doesn't mean that it's effective. Okay, so if we look at John Hattie's graph here, John Hattie has a baseline. He says in his research, he has found that 0.4, okay, is the point in which, and you notice it's in green here. You notice that it's in green. That's the point in which we start doing things that actually has a positive effect on learning. So anything, that is effective in learning, because it's all positive, it's just not as effective. So if we look at student-centered teaching, classroom management, Head Start programs, homework, all these things, they have a positive effect, but through research we find that they are not the most important things. Class size, people always talk about class size. Again, it's not to say that these are bad things. It's just research have found they're not the most effective things. Variables that are 0.4, okay, and above start to become effective. Now, the most effective variables, if you notice, and this makes my point, and I'm sorry if I'm giving a teaching lesson here, but again, I live and breathe this stuff. Look at the top of acts. I call them acts that we do that have a major impact on learning. Let's look at everything. Let's look at 0.7 and up, okay? And purple being obviously the most effective. If you look at 0.7 and up, everything is teacher driven. If you look at 0.4 and down, there's a lot of other variables that affect 0.4 and down. Politics, neighborhood, school, principal. So sometimes a lot of this stuff is not really even homework, because there may be mandates from your district about how much homework to give, or if you're teaching abroad, in the curriculum about how much homework to give. Some of these things teachers really don't have an impact over, or have a small impact. But if you look at the most effective things, every teacher who walks in the classroom has a direct impact on these things. Collective teacher advocacy, student expectations, response to intervention, student advocacy, teacher clarity, feedback. These are all things that teachers need to do or should do to have a dramatic, positive impact on teaching and learning effectiveness. Okay? And all of these things requires either a skillful teacher, a properly trained teacher, who believes in continuous education and professional development, who's reading about the latest best practices in teaching, who care that much to on a Saturday afternoon go to a teaching conference, who cares that much buys books on teaching, who cares that much to get advanced degrees in education. And you notice you have student advocacy and student expectations. And there's a direct correlation between student advocacy and look at the top one, teacher advocacy. And so the most effective thing is teacher advocacy, because if teachers take responsibility and are passionate and are purpose driven, are making decisions based on making informed decisions or data informed decisions, going the extra mile, it will affect student expectation and student advocacy. If teachers are going the extra mile to do response to intervention, which again is something that you have to be skillful in. Okay, I've seen many teachers who want to help but don't know how to help because they don't have that level of training. Okay, so this is the reason, and I want to close this because I'm going way too long, but this is the reason why I wrote the post that I wrote, because as a recruiter, as a school leader, as a consultant, I run into too many people who are there because they need to pay the lights. I run into too many people who are teaching who they couldn't find a job and they need something to do. I run into too many people who want to travel the world. And again, it's nothing wrong if you're the passionate teacher and you are properly trained and you're properly certified and you do all the continuous education and you're highly motivated. There's nothing wrong with wanting to travel the world and do those things. It becomes a perk of teaching. But I do have a problem with the people who if you accept to come into the profession and don't take it seriously, because the teachers who don't take it seriously are also the teachers who really don't know, because they haven't been properly trained. And let's talk about really briefly the people who teach abroad. They think they can go out and get a TESOL or a CELTA, or they think they can run out and get some quick certification and that's it. That's the topping on the cake that's finished. No, it's not finished. I know people who run out and get a TESOL or CELTA and then don't ever apply to anything that they use in a TESOL or CELTA. And not understand that TESOL or CELTA is just a very basic program. A 120-hour course that you may have taken in Thailand or you may have taken at your local university or community college. It does not replace 4 hours of a teaching college. 4 years that a teaching college provides. It doesn't replace an intense master's program that builds upon your experience as a teacher and builds upon your 4-year degree, your 4-year education. And again, I don't knock people who need work and they want to go to teach. But if you decide that you want to teach, go hard. Go hard. Don't say, oh, this is a teaching thing. Don't be proud. Don't be ashamed when somebody asks you what you do and you kind of hesitant. I teach. No. When people say, when I started teaching, I used to go to I live in Baltimore. And when I started teaching, I would travel to Washington, D.C. a lot. And those people who know about Washington, D.C., the number one question people ask you when they first meet you is, what do you do? That's the first thing people from D.C. will ask you. What do you do? They won't ask you your name. It's the first and second question. What's your name and what do you do? And, I know people who are teachers who are only doing it for a job. They even lie where they say, I teach. Well, I'm just doing this teaching thing until something else comes through. No, when I started teaching, people asked me what I did. In Washington, D.C., people said they were lawyers and they were doctors and this and that. It was my turn to teach. I teach at Frederick Douglass High School, English teacher. It's the best profession in the world. I've always been proud of it. And I get insulted that people are not proud of it. Why? Because you have the future in your hands. And I know that sounds sappy and I know it sounds dopey, but you really do have the future in your hands. The things that you do can literally change someone's life. And over my 18 years of doing this, I'm now starting to see it. I'm now starting to see to reap the fruits of my labor from years ago. And I'm starting to see how impactful it is. How we can destroy students or we can build students. And again, as an African American man, we have to look at the fact that many of our urban schools, not all, I'm pretty sure some of you went to outstanding urban schools, but a large percentage of our urban schools are not successful, and a large reason for that lack of success is not having passionate teachers. And as a result, because we don't have passionate teachers, we have unskilled teachers. We have teachers who are not taking an extra mile. We have teachers who don't live and breathe this stuff, and they just go through the process. And what they end up doing is they turn students off to the wonderful world of reading and thinking, and we suffer the circumstances that we currently suffer. I'm 21 minutes in this thing. I'm going to stop now. Some of you probably turned this off a long time ago. For those who did listen, I appreciate you. And again, the post is not meant to insult anyone, but it's really, I wrote that out of not frustration, but concern that I just meet too many people in my various professions, my responsibilities rather, that basically waste their time, and they waste their students' time, and they waste the parents' time and the community's time because they're not serious about teaching. We need serious people in there. You know, if this is your C plan and you're serious about it, great, go for it, hardcore. But if this is an in between job, teaching is not an in between profession. Go and become a waiter, waitress. Thank you.